Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today I've got Paul Watt. Do you have two windows open, Paul? It's not echoing now, though, is it?
I'm not. I just. How's that?
Try that. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that any better?
Yeah. As long as you just don't have that echo. We'll start again, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today I've got Paul Watts, and we're going to talk about the power of consultative selling. Before we get into that, Paul, tell us where they can get hold of you.
Hi, Tim. Yeah, sure. Please, you can get hold of me on LinkedIn. That would be the best platform to get hold of me on.
Okay. And so you have an interesting background, Paul, because you're not a Brit now, but you were a Brit, and you're now in Canada. You're now a resident, so. How is it that you can talk about consultative selling?
That's a great question. So yeah, I started my career as an electronic engineer. So I worked in engineering back in the UK. I worked for a large grinding machine manufacturer for a number of years. And then one day I woke up and I just realized that I wasn't an engineer. I didn't enjoy engineering. That wasn't what I wanted to do. Yeah. And I remember sitting down one lunchtime, just looking through the jobs ads, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I saw a position for a sales engineer. And I thought, sales engineer, I could do that. I mean, sales is easy, right? So I went for the interview and I didn't get the job. But as soon as I found out how much money sales engineers made, that was it. I was going to be a sales engineer. So I set my sights on becoming a sales engineer. I managed to get my next interview. And I managed to get that particular job. And what I learned very, very quickly is that the sales process is very, very similar to the engineering process. And that is a consultative process. You know, you can't engineer a solution to a problem you don't understand. And the only way that you can understand the problem is by asking great questions and doing your research. And then when you figured out that you understand everything, then you can design the solution. And sales works in exactly the same way. Consultative selling works in exactly the same way. You know, you shouldn't be prescribing a solution to the client until you first diagnosed the problem.
And is that what consultative selling is? Because I get loads of people coming to me on LinkedIn telling me that they have a solution to my problem. And, you know, they'll say things like, as a company that's based in the food and beverage industry, and I'm not in the food and beverage industry, and they just then pitch something. Is that wrong then? Am I doing
That's absolutely wrong. Yeah, I mean, that's prescribing without diagnosis, which if we were talking about medicine, that would be medical malpractice. So in sales, prescription without diagnosis would be sales malpractice. And I think far too many salespeople go into a meeting already knowing what they're going to prescribe to that client before they've even completed their diagnosis. I'm an advocate for diagnosing the patient first before you're prescribing them your medicine, so to speak.
So how is it that so we need to go into clients and find out what the problems are before we can diagnose that? How do we do that? What's the way of doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, the magic in sales occurs when we get into what we like to call discovery.
Right.
And the discovery step is that step that you take where you ask lots and lots of really insightful questions. You ask lots of great questions, and you develop this deep understanding of your client's needs, their challenges, and their objectives. And when you fully understand their needs, their challenges, and their objectives, then and only then would you prescribe a solution.
Right. Okay. And so where does qualification fit in, and where does discovery fit in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So qualification for me is one of the steps that you would take before you even go to the meeting with the client. So maybe you've picked up the phone and maybe you've been introduced to somebody, and you pick up the phone, you give them a call, and during that initial conversation, you're qualifying them to determine whether or not they are a potential candidate for your services. And of course, there are lots and lots of different qualification methodologies. There's ANAM, FATE, SCOTSMAN. There's the traditional one, BANT, budget, authority, need, timeline.
So what's Scotsman? Can you remember? What?
Oh, Scotsman, now you've put me on the spot. So
let's pick another one then. If you don't, so BANT's budget, authority, need, and timescale, which a quick, ready reckoner of it's useful.
Yeah, so Scotsman, if I remember rightly, is solution. Do you have a solution that meets their needs? I think C is competition. Do you understand the competition? O, is there actually an opportunity here? T, what is the timeline? S, I think I can't remember what the S is. I'm sorry.
You have a solution to sell them or something.
Yeah. M, money. Do they have money? A, authority, and N is need. We'd have to Google it, but again, there are lots and lots of different qualification methodologies, and I think what's really, really important is that you have one that works for you in your industry and for the products and services that you represent. And once you understand what questions you need to ask to qualify and probably more importantly, disqualify opportunities from your sales funnel, then the ones that have made it through, the ones that you've qualified, those are the ones that are worthy of your time investment to go and meet with that client to see if you can truly help them solve whatever their problems or their challenges are, meet their needs.
So why didn't you just sell to everybody? Why do you qualify things out?
That's a great question. So, I mean, you can't sell everything to everybody. I mean, unfortunately, as much as we'd like to believe that we can, there is no company on this planet that has a product or service that everybody needs. I mean, there's more than 2 billion people on the planet that don't have electricity. So, even if you work for Microsoft, you don't have a product that everybody on the planet needs. No. So, what we need to do is we need to find the customers that best fit the services or the products that we sell, and because those are the clients that we're going to deliver the most value to. Yep. And ultimately, those are the ones that we're going to have the most success with, and that we have the greatest likelihood of securing business with. So, in my mind, you want to be looking for clients that really do fit your ideal client profile. So you've got to build that picture. Jeff Kozer wrote a great book called Selling to Zebras. Right. And in his book, he talks about the importance of understanding what your ideal client looks like. And if your ideal client looks like a zebra, if they walk like a zebra, talk like a zebra, they've got stripes like a zebra, then go out and look for other zebras. Because if your ideal client, if the client that you've delivered the most value for was a zebra, well, then go find all the other clients that look like your best client and sell to them. Don't go after giraffes or elephants or tigers and lions. Go after zebras, sell to zebras. So in my mind, I think that's a big step in the qualification process, is understanding what your ideal client profile or profiles look like, and then knowing what questions you need to ask to qualify whether that potential client fits into that category.
Yeah, and I think that's really important what you say, which is actually having, as a sales organization, an understanding of who your ideal client is. And then what we're doing is that part of the review process is to put, does this client actually fit that? But I'm glad you came on to questions. So questioning. What's your advice about questioning?
Yeah, I love that question, actually. So I have a quote. I use it in all my workshops, and anybody who's ever been through one of my workshops knows what quote I'm referring to right now. But my favorite quote is, "We don't outsell the competition, we out question them."
Right.
And what I mean by that is you ask better questions than your competition. You develop a better understanding of your client's needs, their challenges and their objectives, and then you prescribe the best solution to meet those needs, those challenges, and those objectives.
Yeah.
So great salespeople are great question askers. And of course, there are lots and lots of different types of question that you could ask. You know, the 4 questions that I ask salespeople to really focus in on are situational questions, aspirational questions, impact and implication questions. Okay. So I'll explain why for me.
Give me an example, Paul.
Yeah, why those are important. So situational questions are questions that help you understand where the customer is today with respect to the challenges that you believe your products or services would address for them. So you want to ask them questions about where they are today, so you know where they are today. Then
give us an example of a question.
Yeah. So for example, for me, if I'm selling sales training to a company, I might ask an organization, tell me a little bit about your sales team today. Tell me a little bit about your sales process, your selling process. Tell me, how do you grow and develop business? How do you fill your funnel? How do you fill your pipeline? Tell me about your organization from a sales standpoint today. Describe your sales team, your sales process for me. So I might ask questions like that help me to understand where that organization is today. Those are situational questions. Aspirational questions help me to understand where does the client want to be. So if you know where they are, and you know where they want to be, what you've established, of course, is the gap between those 2 points. And hopefully, if you've qualified the account correctly, that gap is a gap that you can fill with your products or services, because hopefully your products and services are the solution that bridges the gap between where they are and where they'd like to be. Mm-hmm. So again, those are 2 sets of questions that I think it's really, really important for a salesperson to have, in their toolbox of questions. The next 2 sets of questions that I think are really important for salespeople to develop are what we call impact and implication questions. Okay. So implication questions are the questions you ask. So what happens if you do nothing? What happens if you stay as you are? What happens if you don't do this? What happens if you move forward with my competitor's solution and not my solution? What happens if that piece of the solution is missing from and you implement that? So you're asking implication questions. Now, the implication questions that you ask will help you to uncover something that we call COI. COI is the cost of inaction. That is the risk of not moving forward with your solution or the risk of moving forward with somebody else's solution. So we want to understand COI. The impact questions, these are the questions that we ask that help us to uncover ROI. So, hey, what happens, if you do implement my solution? What would be the positive impact if we were able to solve that problem? So what we're trying to understand is, what is the return on investment? What is the reward for moving forward with my solution? And what is the risk of not moving forward with my solution? So risk, COI, reward, ROI. In my mind, a consultative sales professional should be able to build a financial justification and a business case for the client as to why they should want to move forward with their solution. And that business case, that financial justification, should have both a risk and a reward element to it, in my opinion.
Okay. And I think that's fair in terms of asking those questions. And my favorite always is, what happens if you do nothing?
That's a great implication question, right?
I've asked that, so many times, and it's just great. And of course, you ask the question, you go, and then you're silent.
So that's important. And I can't stress this enough, Tim. How many times have you been on a joint sales call with a salesperson and they ask the question and then they answer it?
Then they answer it. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Or they go, that's a stupid question. Why have you asked that?
What's important to you? It's price, isn't it? Well, if you ask the question, then you need to be silent. Sales are made in the silence and lost in the noise. You need to be able to ask silence-causing questions. Now, the thing about silence-causing questions, and this is a concept that we cover in our program, the thing about silence-causing questions. Now, let me ask you this, Tim. If I ask you a question, and let's say you were on a joint call with me, and I asked the client a question, and the client goes silent.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, either they don't know, or they don't want to share it with you, or generally, I would have thought that you've uncovered something pretty hefty.
I'm going to go with the third one. I'm going with the third one. I think it could be any of those three, but I would say more often than not, it's probably the third one. You've uncovered something hefty. Why did they go quiet? First of all, they went quiet because you asked a question that caused them to think. They now have to think about the answer, and the fact that you've caused them to think and you've caused them to go silent tells you something extremely important about that question. No one else has asked it.
Yes.
Now that is valuable information for you, because now you know that you're leaving that meeting with information that your competition don't have. You're leaving that meeting with insights that your competition don't have. That is a very, very powerful concept. So silence causing questions, that's what you should be striving to ask your customers. You should be asking questions that cause them to think. And they go, hey, that's a great question, Tim. No one's ever asked me that. I need to think about that. The last thing you do while they're thinking is talk. You've got to be quiet. Let them think. So silence causing questions for me they're the most satisfying questions I can ask in a meeting. Because if I ask a question and the other person goes quiet, that I know that I'm getting information that my competition doesn't have. So what we've got to remember is sales are made in the silence and lost in the noise. Ask silence-causing questions, and you are absolutely on the right track as far as consultative selling is concerned. The vast majority of your meeting should be asking questions and listening and taking notes on the answers that you get. It should not be you talking or pitching or trying to persuade the other person. It's fact gathering, information gathering, so that you understand fully the challenge that they have, their objectives and their needs, so then you can prescribe a solution to meet those needs.
Yeah, I remember walking into I remember being in Dubai, and I used to sell supply chain systems, and I was called in, and we went from, it was 45 degrees, we went from the air conditioned car across the car park to the air conditioned office, and we were there to sell a warehousing system, and warehousing was not what we were about. There was plenty of other competition who were far better at warehousing than we were. And I walked in, and there was all these tires at the front of the warehouse. And I just walked in. I said, why have you got all those tires there? And the salesperson said, don't ask that. It's a stupid question. And actually the client said, actually, what I want to tell you is that the tires are here. And actually he told us that actually it wasn't about his warehouse. It was the fact that his supply chain was which is where our strength was. What we were about was selling end-to-end supply chain, not a point solution in terms of a warehouse. And he told us about the fact that he couldn't stop the lorries just turning up and delivering stuff, and then it would be tires standing outside in 45 degrees heat, and they would perish and stuff like that. And it was like, just asking that one question, the person opened up. And
wasn't a stupid question, was it?
And it wasn't a stupid question. And we won the deal, and it was the thing that unlocked the whole of the sale for that moved us from a position of weakness to a mission of strength. So I totally get that.
There are no stupid questions except the ones you don't ask.
Yeah,
and it's funny because that takes me back to have you heard of the curiosity test?
No.
Do you know there's a curiosity test, right?
No.
Oh, well, there is.
Okay, tell us that then.
Yeah. Well, the curiosity test, well, that was it. And the first question should be, oh, well, what is that?
Okay.
So the curiosity test though, and it's very, very powerful, right? Because people who are curious, naturally curious, you can teach somebody to be curious, but people who are naturally curious would ask a question like that. They would say, so hey, what are all the tires doing?
Well, yeah, the tires doing that. Of course, you'd ask that question.
See, that's something that somebody who's curious would ask. Now, somebody who's not curious or inquisitive, well, I'm not here to talk about tires. I'm here to talk about warehousing systems. That's a stupid question. No, it's not. So as you discovered, there are no stupid questions except the one you didn't ask. Interestingly, the very first sales interview that I went for that I didn't get, I failed the curiosity test. So the professional interviewer that interviewed me had a curiosity test question in the interview. Now, we're going back a long time, Tim, but during that interview, right at the end of the interview, after they asked you all the questions about, why do you think you'd be a good fit for this organization, etc., they used to be able to ask you medical questions. Now, of course, they can't do that today, but back then, they'd ask you questions like, how old are you? Do you smoke? Do you drink? Do you take drugs? How healthy are you? All of those kinds of questions. And I remember I was going through the answers. So do you smoke? Nope, never smoked. Do you drink? Well, I play rugby. Okay, yes. Do you take drugs? Nope, don't take any drugs. And then the interviewer said, have you ever been bitten by a dog? And I thought, that's a strange question. But I was thinking, well, I'm going to be in a job where I'm going to be visiting lots of different organizations. And some of those are quite harsh industries, steel works and coal mines and things like that. So I'm thinking maybe they want to know if I've been bitten by a dog because they want to know if I had my tetanus shot. And that, in my mind, that's how I rationalized it. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe he just wants to know if I've had my tetanus shot. So I said, yeah, I was bitten by a dog when I was about 12. But I am up to date with my tetanus shots. And he went, oh, okay, great. And he wrote that down. And then he said, okay, have you got any questions for me? And of course, the question that's going through my mind is, have you ever been bitten by a dog? And I said, yeah. And I went straight to my prepared questions. I didn't ask, have you been bitten by a dog?
Right.
So I left the interview, didn't ask. And all the way home from that interview, that question was bugging me. It was bugging me. And I got home and I was chatting with one of my friends and he's like, hey, how did the interview go? And I said, well, I thought it went really well. I said, it was just this one question that the interviewer asked and it threw me through a bit of a loop. And he said, all right, what was the question? And I said, well, the interviewer asked me, have you ever been bitten by a dog? And my friend said, why did he ask you that? And I said, I honestly don't know. Oh, shit. I should have asked. But I still had the guy's card. And I thought, I'm going to call him up. So I actually called him. So I called him back. And I said to the gentleman, I said, hi, it's Paul Watts. You interviewed me this morning. He's like, oh, yeah. Hey, Paul, did you forget something? I said, actually, yes, I did. I said, during the interview, you asked me if I'd ever been bitten by a dog.
Yeah.
Why did you ask me that? And there was this silence. And then it was, I heard this big belly laugh. He was a big guy. And I heard this big belly laugh. And then at the other end, he said, Paul, that was the curiosity test. And I'm afraid to say that you failed.
Yeah.
And I said, did I? And he said, well, yeah, you're supposed to ask, why do you want to know that? And I said, what am I doing now?
Yeah.
And he said, you know what, Paul, that's a very good point. I'm actually going to give you half a mark for that. And I went, half a mark? I said, in all the years that you've been using that curiosity test, how many people have ever called you back? And he said, Paul, you would be the first. I said, it's got to be worth 2 marks. He said, do you know what, Paul? I'm going to give you 2 marks, but you're still not getting the job. And then he went on to explain that I wasn't getting the job because they were looking for somebody who was an experienced salesperson. And he didn't even know why they'd even invited me to interview because I didn't have any sales experience. But what that taught me is right from the outset, there are no stupid questions except the ones you don't ask. Yeah. So I'm on your side there, Tim. I think that question you asked unlocked the keys to that sale. And had you not asked them, you may not have had the productive meeting that you had, and you might have had the meeting that your colleague was planning to have, which may not have gotten you the deal.
Yeah, we wouldn't have got it now. So I got one final question for you, Paul, before we wrap up, which is about time. And that does time change the answers to questions?
Does time change the answers to questions? Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I think, one thing that I've learned over my career is that just because something was true 6 months ago does not make it true today. Just because somebody has all their ducks in a row 6 months ago does not mean that all their ducks are still in a row 6 months from now, or vice versa. So, I was taught by one of my sales leaders who I reported to, and early in my career, he shared a very valuable insight that I've carried with me throughout my career. And that was, you should treat every customer and every visit like they're brand new.
Yeah.
Don't assume that even if you know the answer to some questions, just go back over those topics and say, hey, last time we met, this was true. Is that still the case? I think it's really, really important to recognize that things do change over time. And just because there wasn't an opportunity 6 months ago doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity now, or doesn't mean that they won't be in another 6 months. So I think it's really, really important that we recognize that the landscape within your client's organization is ever evolving, ever changing. And as such, you need to be constantly updating your understanding of their organization, because your understanding of their organization is based at a certain point in time. And that may govern how you treat and how you behave with that account. And you may not be behaving appropriately because things may have changed. So that's a great question that you asked.
It's my second favorite question, which is always going to clients and ask what's changed since we met last.
Absolutely.
And while it can be seen as a bit of a cliche, you need to be doing it. Maybe you do it in your own words, but there will always be things changed. People get promoted, people get demoted. There's political things going on. I mean, not only is there's the hierarchy, but there's the political map, and you need to understand. And you've got, if you think that you're competing probably with another 2 or 3 competitors, and their salespeople are going to be as good as or even better than you, things will change.
I have this thought process when it comes to meetings, Tim, and that is, I may be outsold in a deal, but I'll never be out questioned. I will never be out questioned. I will always have asked more questions than my competition, and that's my goal. When I go in, I want to help that customer. That's my intent. And if my intention is to help that customer, the only way that I can help them is if I truly understand their challenges and their needs and their objectives. And the only way I can truly understand their needs, their challenges and objectives is to ask great questions. So I go back to the very first quote. We don't outsell the competition, we out-question them.
Yeah, fantastic. Been great talking to you, Paul. Remind everybody where they can get hold of you.
Yeah, please. If you want to reach out, I'm on LinkedIn, and all I would ask is please send a personalized invite, and do let me know where you found me. So please make sure that you mention that you saw me in the interview with Tim. And
you do a podcast as well, I believe.
We do, yeah. Our podcast is called the Sales Reinvented Podcast, and we've got a series coming up on prospecting and lead generation. And actually, Tim, you're one of our guests.
So, I am one of the guests on it. Yes.
Yes.
But it's not. Mine isn't coming out until next April. So it's a joke, by the way. It's banter, by the way. It's an English thing.
It's an English thing. Only. Yes. Yeah. Only the English listeners will get that.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. It's been great talking to you again.
My pleasure. Great chatting to you again, Tim.
Yeah. And stay safe.
Likewise. Take care.
Yeah. Be careful out there.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Cheers, Paul.